So this is the 6th edition of the Build Peace Conference, and every year the theme and inquiry that we propose emerges from the conversations we've had in previous years. At the core of all of our themes is an overarching question. What is the relationship between digital technologies and peace? And this question about emergent challenges to peace in the digital era and the emergent opportunities for peace in the digital era is also at the heart of Build Up's mission. So why focus on borders this year? Those of you who were at Build Peace 2018 might remember that last year in the opening remarks, I suggested that we challenge an assumption often held by those of us working in peace tech or in civic tech, that technology is just a tool, and what matters is how we choose to use it, that digital technologies are essentially neutral. Instead, I suggested that we start to think about how digital technology is tooling us, how it is altering the human experience, and how that is relevant to conflict and peace. I think the key to understanding this is to look at how digital technology is altering our incentives and affecting how we construct discourse. From personal incentives to strive for online approval to the polarization of political discourse, digital technologies are changing how we form our identities. And what are identities if not borders? The ultimate borders, the thing that drives, fuels, and explains so many of the conflicts we all work on. I want to be clear that I don't think that digital technologies necessarily have a net negative effect on conflict. I just don't think we should conceive of them as tools, but rather as part of our human experience. It provides a richer frame to understand how they interact with conflict. When it comes to borders, whether they're digital or physical or social borders, technologies offer an opportunity for contestation, and they also offer opportunities for coercion. And we need to be aware of both as we understand the context of a conflict and the opportunities for peace. This is perhaps clearest to me with the base technology for borders, for physical borders, which is maps. Maps are definitely not tools. They have reshaped our experience of space significantly. The philosopher Alfred Korzybski famously wrote that the map is not the territory. And many others, Robert Pirsig, Lewis Carroll, Borges, have explored that idea of an abstraction derived from something not being the thing itself, but rather being something that changes our experience of that thing. I'm personally very interested in this interaction in between geographic information systems and peace. The first peace tech project that I ever worked on was in Sudan, and it involved using digital maps to help a local peace committee better understand and manage intertribal conflicts. And I have a vivid memory of opening a community meeting on the border between Darfur and Western Kordofan, which is a particularly volatile area, and we projected a map that we had drawn with the community. And we had also included the government-approved state borders. And we were promptly informed by one of the local chiefs that his tribe was armed and ready to defend that this was not, in fact, where the border should be. We turned the conversation around by showing how the digital map could be edited, adding details of the story about the tribal boundaries, and problematizing that state border that was drawn on the map. So the digital map changed the way that space was experienced. It was seen as an instrument of coercion, but it also offered an opportunity for contestation. I've often wondered about our fascination with maps, digital or otherwise. And recently, I came across a poem by Yesenia Montilla called Maps that captures some of this fascination. I'm just going to read an excerpt from it. Because what is a map but a useless prison? We are all so lost, and no naming of blank spaces can save us. And what is a map but the delusion of safety? The line drawn is always in the sand and folds on itself before we're done making it. What is a map but the delusion of safety? Maps are safe because they tell us who is in and who is out. Us and them, mine and other. Maps are intrinsically linked to identity. And as I said before, I think identity is the ultimate place where we are seeing how digital technologies shape conflict and peace. Much has been written over the past 2 or 3 years about the processes of identity formation online. If I had to summarize what I've learned from reading others and from the work that we do at Build Up, I'd say that there are 3 axes to consider: fragmentation and voice, power and truth, and polarization and activism. So here are the opportunities for contestation. Digital technologies allow for more people to have direct access to the production and diffusion of information, bringing out more voices. This means that prevalent narratives, the hegemony of truth as held by the powerful, is breaking down. It means that more intersectional perspectives are entering our conversation. Activism is strengthened. We can build a more plural and inclusive world in which more people have a say on how we live together. This is all critical to peace. But here are some opportunities for coercion. The visibility of more identities makes polarization more likely. And many of the recommender algorithms that drive our digital technologies are built to help us experience more of the same and to push us towards poles. Conversations on digital platforms are also short, immediate, and publicly recorded, making quickly identifying with positions more attractive than slowly parsing out common needs. And what's more, the fragmentation of narratives makes it easier for some to devalue truth and put forward simplified and baseless positions. These are all drivers of conflict. I'm ultimately an optimist, so I tend to think that more voices, more activism, and more challenges to power are on balance a good thing. That it's worth the risk of polarization and fragmentation to build a truly plural and inclusive society. But then, sometimes I forget that technology is tooling me too. And something happened recently that brought that home to me. I love poetry, as you may have noticed, and though I'm no expert, it seems to me that digital media has made more voices, and especially more intersectional voices, available in poetry. There are more Insta poets, blogs, online magazines, and on a personal level, people WhatsApp me poetry all the time. And so a few months ago, someone sent me a poem by Imtiaz Darker called She Must Be From Another Country that I love. So here's another excerpt. Maybe there is a country where all of us live, all of us freaks who aren't able to give our loyalty to fat old fools, the crooks and thugs who wear the uniform that gives them the right to wave a flag, puff out their chests, put their feet on our necks, and break their own rules. But from where we are, it doesn't look like a country. It's more like the cracks that grow between borders behind their backs. That's where I live. The cracks that grow between borders behind their backs. Yes, that is definitely where I live. So then I sent it to several other people, including Michaela, who's Build Up's other director and co-founder. And she said, hang on a minute, what is this really saying? The entire poem is pitting us against them. It is combative. And she's right to question this. Of course, there is so much about this poem that I love. It speaks to me, it soothes me, and it should be spoken, this truth. But it is also polarizing. It is affirming my identity as other and leveraging that to create a border. It is telling me that I am right. And I am, right? Through this poem, I stand for human rights. And yet I know that when I stood on the border between Darfur and Western Kordofan, we built a broad tent through a digital map that made space for perpetrators of violence and victims of violence to define a common territory, to find each other's humanity. You know, this tension between human rights and peace building is something we've puzzled over at Build Up with our intervention in online spaces in the USA, which is a project called The Commons that you'll be hearing more about in the short talks. For many people, the polarization of political discourse on social media is a way of taking a stand against what is wrong and for what is right. Depolarizing is giving in. And maybe there's some truth to that. Some giving in is needed to make room for dialogue. One thing that I know social media has done to our discourse is made it harder to foster complexity, to change position, to be vulnerable. It's made our social borders harder. I'd hate to be a teenager now and have my evolving ramblings about what I thought the world was like or should be like recorded for all to see. I'm sure I said some things I would not stand by now. Didn't you? And weren't you glad to have the space to change them? In the USA, people talk about being woke. And like Darker's poem, that's often music to my ears. Yes, please recognize your privilege and remind me of mine. But I recently read an article by Rebecca Solnit. And she reminds us that if you're woke, it's because someone woke you. So remember who woke you and pass it on. Remember the person who made you reflect rather than feel shame. Remember those who listened and extended their empathy before they asked for your understanding. All borders were made to be crossed, and it helps when someone gives you a hand over a new border. Sometimes I think that peace building is essentially a way of being with others. It has much more to do with how we approach our fellow people. Do we respect them? Do we acknowledge their dignity? Do we identify our needs with theirs? In short, do we love them? In Song of Myself by Walt Whitman, he writes this, and this will be the last poem that I read you, I promise. He says, Walt Whitman, a cosmos of Manhattan the sun, turbulent, fleshy, sensual, eating, drinking, and breeding. No sentimentalist, no stander above men and women or apart from them. No more modest than immodest. Unscrew the locks from the doors. Unscrew the doors themselves from their jambs. Whoever degrades another degrades me. And whatever is done or said returns at last to me. That last line, it seems to me, strikes the delicate border between rights and dialogues that I think we're trying to walk as peace builders. So we have a tradition at Build Peace conferences. We always have a conference slogan, which encapsulates how we hope to approach conversations in this space. So I'd like to propose that we make this our 2019 slogan. Whoever degrades another degrades me, and whatever is done or said returns at last to me. I look forward to a rich conversation on peace, conflict, and resilience along borders, and how technology can both create and bridge divides.